Now, sometime after the Jerusalem Council, and this has all supposedly been settled, that these Gentiles under Paul's ministry, who had been saved by the gospel of grace, were free to eat whatever they wanted to eat. They were not under any law of dietary form whatsoever. And Peter comes up to visit the Antioch church, and now look at it. It's rather interesting. Verse 11. But when Peter was come to Antioch, sometime after the Jerusalem Council, Paul says, I withstood him to the face. Now, I think he had to get on a soapbox to do that, because I think Peter was a big, tall Galilean, and I think Paul was pretty much a short, typical Jew. And nevertheless, what does the statement say? I withstood him to the face. Publicly. See? My, that must have been an embarrassing thing for Peter. And look what goes on. And so he says, I withstood him to the face. Why? Because he was to be blamed. He was at fault. Now, this isn't the first time poor old Peter stumbled. Nor do we get to the place where we don't stumble. So again, I'm not taking anything away from Peter. He was just as human as all of us. And here he stumbled. And Paul called him on it. All right, verse 12. Here was the whole reason. For before, that is in time-wise, before that certain came from James, see, who is now the head man at Jerusalem, when emissaries came to Antioch from James's congregation in Jerusalem, before that, Peter ate with Paul and those Gentile believers, regardless of what the meal was. But after these Jewish people came up from Jerusalem, what does Peter do? Hey, he's scared of them. He's afraid of them. And so to continue on and maintain the testimony of Paul's gospel of grace that he could prove to these Jews from Jerusalem, hey fellas, we are free to eat whatever we want to eat. We are no longer under the dietary laws. We've been set free from all that. Instead of that, Peter gives in. See? Isn't that something? He gave in and refused to go in and eat with Paul's Gentile converts. Well, can you imagine what this did to the Apostle Paul? Boy, now Paul had that little short temper side of him. I know he did. He has to apologize for it. And I think Paul just got real upset with Peter. Now, Peter, you're being two-faced. That's what we'd say today. When there wasn't anybody from Jerusalem, you didn't have any problem eating with us and my Gentile converts. But as soon as those people came from Jerusalem, then you say, no, I'm a good Jew. I can't do that. And so Paul calls him on it. And so he says, he did eat with the Gentiles, verse 12, and when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, that is, from the Gentiles, fearing who? Not God, the men from Jerusalem. Now, I've always given Peter credit, and I still do. Do you remember that leading up to his crucifixion, and suddenly when he saw that Jesus was arrested, and the young maid thought she recognized him, and you know the account. She said, well, you're one of them. What did he do? He denied it 3 times. He denied it. Swore. Why? He was afraid of the powers that were. But I've always made this point, and I'll make it again. After Peter witnessed the resurrection and the power of it, what happened to him? He was a different person. He was no longer afraid of anybody. He stood up to the Jewish religious leaders. He stood up to the Romans and no doubt took a martyr's death because of it. But here, as an ordinary practicing Jew, in a moment of weakness amongst these Gentile believers, he blows his testimony again. And Paul has to call him on it. And so what does he say? Verse 13. And other Jews, because of what Peter did, other Jews dissembled or withdrew likewise with him, even to the point insomuch that Barnabas, good old Barnabas, that's seen everything that Paul was accomplishing among the Gentiles, even Barnabas was carried away with their dissimulation or their hypocrisy, that they couldn't eat with these Gentiles. All right, verse 14. But Paul says, when I saw that they walked not uprightly. Peter not walking uprightly? No, not here he wasn't. He was failing miserably. And Paul says, and when they were not walking uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. What gospel? Paul's gospel, the gospel of grace, which now sets us free from these dietary rules and regulations. There is now no difference between Jew and Gentile. And Peter was not yet ready to recognize that. All right. That if thou, being a Jew, which of course Peter and Barnabas were, if you're going to live after the manner of Gentiles, if you are going to admit that the grace of God has set you free from the law, and do not as the Jews, then why are you being, and I think it's a matter of being two-faced. If this is what you understand, that the grace of God has set everybody free from the law, then why do you still compel Gentiles to live as Jews? You see what he's saying? And listen, it's no different today. Oh, I know the rhetoric is a little different, but the concept is the same. That people are adding things that do not belong to the gospel of grace, and then they wonder why people have a hard time comprehending it. Well, it's confusion, see? Now he says in verse 15, we who are Jews by nature, that is by birth, naturally, and we're not of those pagan Gentiles who, of course, were looked down upon by the Jews of that day. Now verse 16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but, now let's put the verb back in, he's justified by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ that we might be justified by the faith of Christ and not by the works of the law. Now we're going to go back to Romans where it makes it a lot plainer than this. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Now the reason I want to go back to Romans, in fact, let's now we know, Romans 3:19, now we know that what things soever the law saith, now that's the 10 Commandments that we're referring to, it saith to them who are under the law. In other words, the 10 Commandments were directly given to the nation of Israel, not to the Gentile world, to Israel. But since it's the law of the sovereign Creator God, how far does the influence of that law go? To the ends of the earth. And look what the rest of the verse says. That every mouth may be stopped. Even a Gentile can't come up and after having stolen something say, well, I never did anything wrong. You did because the law of God says it's against His will, it's against His law to steal. All right? So every mouth was stopped. And all the world, not just Israel, all the world become guilty before God. Therefore, that being the case, by the deeds of the law, in other words, by law-keeping, by works, shall no flesh, Jew or Gentile, be justified in His sight. Why? Because the law only has one, what shall I say, function. The law only has one function. And now you know we got people all over, even Tulsa and Oklahoma, who think that by keeping the law, keeping the commandments, they're making brownie points, and someday God will just let them, like one fellow told me, oh, he said, if I can just slip in under the door. It's not going to work that way. The law wasn't given for that at all. The law had one function, and what was it? to show mankind how sinful they really are. Every human being has been a lawbreaker, and we're sinners by nature. And consequently, by keeping the Ten Commandments, no flesh shall be justified, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. But all right, now let's come on down. Verse 23, for all have sinned, not just Gentiles, like the Jews perhaps thought, but everybody, Jew and Gentile, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And you know, I've put it on this program over and over and over. Not because of anything we have done. That's not what makes us a sinner. We're sinners because of who we are. We're sons of Adam. You know, I've put it on the board many, many times. We sin because we're sinners. We're not sinners because we sin. We sin because we're sinners. We're offspring of Adam. So all have sinned and come short. All right, now then, but here's the remedy. Verse 24. Being justified freely, without a cause, by His grace, His unmerited favor poured out on us, and through the redemption or the buying back process that is in Christ Jesus. All right, come on down to verse 25 and 26. Whom God, Christ Jesus, whom God has set forth to be a propitiation through faith in His blood. Now remember, we looked at the ramifications of the blood in our last program, going all the way back to Genesis 9, Leviticus 17. The blood was something special in God's sight because in the blood is what? Life. See? Life is in the blood. All right? And so through faith in the blood of Christ, wherein is, yes, the significance of His death, but far more the potential power for what? Life. Eternal life. All right? And so reading on, so we declare His righteousness for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God. And then verse 26, to declare, I say at this time, His righteousness, the righteousness of Christ, that He, Christ, might be just, fair, in every which way. And all of this is wrapped up in the person of Christ and His finished work. And the justifier of him who repents and is baptized. Oh, hey, that's a lot of people think. Read it any which way you want. Oh, to him who does this or does that. To him who keeps the commandment. No, it doesn't say that. It says that He will be the justifier of him who believeth. See? Who believeth. And then he comes into verse 27. So where's boasting? Who can brag? Who can boast? Well, it's excluded. Why? Because the law of faith excludes it. And the law of faith is believe the gospel. Going on to verse 17. Galatians 2, now verse 17. But if while we seek to be justified by Christ, not by the law, but if we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves also are found sinners. Remember what I said? We're children of Adam. Is therefore Christ the minister of sin? Well, perish the thought. And here's the basic reasoning. Now verse 18. Now this takes a little thinking. I know it does. But think it through. Poor Paul, remember his past. A religious Jew par excellence. The likes of which no one else could even come close to. But look what he says. For if I build again the things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. Now what's he saying? Here he has been a law-keeping Jew, and he just killed people because they were accepting something contrary to that. And so he was a religious zealot. But when he suddenly realized that all of that counted for nothing because the work of the cross had now become preeminent, and it's only through faith in the finished work of the cross that sinners can be saved, now he says, if I go back and put my converts back under the law and command them to keep circumcision, then I am rebuilding what I have torn down. You get that? Now let me repeat it. Here he'd been a great practitioner of Judaism. He thought the law and the temple and the Old Testament was the epitome of everything. But once he saw the truth of the power of the gospel of Christ, how that he died, shed his blood, and rose from the dead, then he could literally destroy everything of the old account. And let me show you. Move on to verse 19. And this is his whole reason for pressing on constantly throughout the Roman Empire with the gospel of the grace of God. For I, through the law, am dead to the law. Now this is Romans 7 all over again. For I, through the law, am dead to the law, that I may live unto God. Now let's analyze this a minute. What was the law? Perfect, right? It was the very mind of God. It was perfect from God's point of view. But what was it from man's point of view? It was something he couldn't keep. It was weak. It was beggarly. Because even though it was perfect from God's point of view, from man's standpoint, he couldn't keep it because there was no power in the law to help him keep it. Understand? I'm quoting him, word for word. You can never be saved until you know that you're lost. How do you know that you're lost? Because the law condemns you. See? If it weren't for the law, anybody could say, well, I'm good enough. God will accept me. But the law says you're guilty. There isn't a one of us in this room that hasn't broken the 10 Commandments. We know that. And if we've broken the 10 Commandments, what are we? We're lawbreakers. And if we're a lawbreaker, we're a what? A sinner. That's all. You know, a lot of people have got the idea that a sinner is just somebody that's down in the gutter. Somebody who has committed murder, or somebody who has been in a house of ill repute, or any of these things that the world looks of as maybe sinful. Hey, listen, good people are sinners. Nice people are sinners. Church people are sinners. Because we're all guilty of having broken God's perfect law. And so what condemns us? The law. Oh, beginning in verse 7 of Romans 7. Now this is a dilemma. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? Is the law something wicked or evil? Well, banish the thought. No, I had not known sin. That is, you remember I always say in Romans the best explanation is the old sin nature? Paul says, I wouldn't have known about my old sin nature except the law. For I had not known what lust was, except the law said, thou shalt not do it. See how simple that is? So it was the law that condemned this religious Jew, that he thought was keeping it. Read on. But verse 8, but sin, his old sin nature, taking occasion by the commandments, the law, wrought in me all manner of concupiscence. In other words, it got his mind just broiling. For without the law, the old nature was dead. It was inoperative. But it was the law that exercised it, see? Verse 10. No, verse 9. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, thou shalt not covet, old Adam woke up, and old Adam in Saul's makeup said, hey, that's me. That's me. I'm a coveter. And then what did he do? I died. Well, now what does he mean? Well, he had to die in the realm of that old Adam who was a lawbreaker. And with the death of old Adam, what happens? New life. And that's what we talk about all the time. That's salvation. When our old Adam is put to death because he was a lawbreaker, and we become a believer in the finished work of the Christ, which is the gospel, then what? We're a new creation. We're alive. We have eternal life. The whole 9 yards. All right, and Paul is constantly referring to that. As Peter said, in all his epistles, this is all he talks about. All right, back to Galatians chapter 2. Galatians chapter 2. And now let's move on to verse 20, which is a classic. It's a verse, I think, that most kids in daily vacation Bible school, at least they used to, always memorize, and I hope they still do, where now Paul gives his own personal testimony under inspiration of the Spirit, and it becomes, of course, part of the Word of God. And look what he says. I am what? Crucified. See? Crucified. I am crucified. Now, Paul didn't die on a Roman cross. If he did die a martyr's death, it was, I think, by beheading. He was never crucified. So what's he talking about? Oh, that day on the road to Damascus when the Lord spoke to him and literally knocked him to the ground. And the moment Saul of Tarsus recognized that he was dealing with the ascended Jesus of Nazareth, the crucified one, what happened? Old Saul died. He was crucified. Where? In the old Adam. In the old Adam. And immediately what happened? He became a new man, a new creation. And so this is Paul's whole thrust of teaching, that now as believers we have these two forces working within us. God reckons old Adam as absolutely dead. But in experience, well, he's still there. You know, I've always told people, I probably shock people once in a while, I don't mind the attacks of Satan half as much as I do the attacks of my old Adam. Now think about that. As you go through a week of life right here and now, where do you run into most of your difficulty? Not satanic as much as old Adam. Old Adam. He's the one that pops these thoughts into our mind. He's the one that catches us in these moments of weakness. And of course, don't take away from Satan's power, not that. But it's our old Adam that just constantly confronts us to still go the direction of the old Adamic nature. But opposite it, we have that new nature which is energized by the Holy Spirit. All right, now verse 20. Only got a minute left. All right, I am crucified, Paul says, with Christ. In other words, when Christ died, that's when we died. Nevertheless, I live, physically. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life, Paul says, that I now live in the flesh, here and now, day by day. How do we live it? By, I hope I'm not doing violence to the text, by the faithfulness. I like to put in there. The Greek probably won't let me do that, but it just helps me personally that the life I now live in the flesh, I live because of the faithfulness of the one who bought me. See? He is faithful. He will never let us down. And then Paul goes on to say, by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Now, you know, I'm always saying, and how did Peter put it in Acts chapter 2? You killed the Messiah. Paul says, he died for you. Now that's graphic difference. And this is what we have to understand. So again, look at this verse. The life we now live in the flesh, we live by the faithfulness. Because God is able to keep us, to empower us, to live a life that is pleasing. And we show that He loved us and He gave Himself for us. And this is what we have to constantly remember.